Mass News 11 at 11.
As the state's migrant crisis continues, a growing number of local communities have been designated as supplemental shelters. In Hadley, several migrant families are now staying at a hotel turned emergency shelter. Welcome, everyone, to Western Mass News 11 at 11 on this Tuesday. I'm Chris Pisano. Western Mass News reporter Maria Wilson joining us live in studio tonight with the story. Maria.
Chris, more than 30 people are now staying at the Night Inn in Hadley, which is a state-designated shelter. Just a couple of weeks ago, their arrival coming about a week before the governor's November 1st deadline to stop adding emergency shelter units. Hadley joined a list of more than 90 Massachusetts communities providing emergency shelter to thousands of families. With only 2 weeks' notice, town officials had to kick preparations into high gear.
The timing of it and the lack of preparation, we really had no warning at all.
2 weeks ago, the state designated a Hadley hotel as a supplemental shelter for homeless families, and by the end of last week, town officials were notified that 4 families had moved into the Nights Inn hotel, which sparked an immediate response from town administrator Carolyn Brennan, the local police department, and other state officials.
We got together a task force within the town with certain departments to say let's be prepared, let's be ready, because you really don't get any kind of notice.
And in the days since the family's arrivals, the town has worked diligently to identify the needs of the 34 people living in the shelter.
There was some single moms, there was babies, there was young children. We had to really do kind of an assessment of what were the needs. There was prescriptions that needed to be refilled. There was, daycare issues. There's transportation issues, food issues. There really wasn't enough food provided the first few days.
Brennan says that this isn't directly costing Hadley taxpayers, and she anticipates that the governor will release funds to reimburse the town. But as the town is in the early stages of its response, Brennan says there are still lingering concerns.
I can't even say the financial impact is the biggest concern, but it's also if there's a bigger impact on public safety, that would be a concern. We've done our due diligence reaching out to other communities to see what some of the points of concern and stress are. Some of it is there can be some, increase in need for public safety, ambulance, and things like that.
I also spoke with Hadley's police chief after he met with local lawmakers. He relayed to Senator Joanne Comerford and State Representative Daniel Carey the town's concerns related to communication, oversight, and coordination. He says that the lawmakers say that they'll do whatever they can to help. He also tells me that the town departments are now working together to make sure that the families in need, their needs have been met and that citizens feel safe. Reporting live in studio, Maria Wilson, Western Mass News.
Maria, thank you.